Imagine waking up inside an empire that believes its dominance is permanent, its currency untouchable, and its power protected by history itself. Markets are rising, confidence feels natural, and the institutions that surround you seem too large and too stable to ever truly fail. And yet, beneath the surface, beneath the optimism and headlines, small structural fractures are quietly widening in ways almost no one notices. Spain once believed that silver guaranteed supremacy. Britain trusted its navy and industry, and the Soviet Union projected strength even as its economic core weakened. So here is the unsettling paradox. What if collapse is not chaos or accident, but a repeating structural sequence hidden inside success? And if that is true, what stage does a modern superpower enter before it even realizes decline has begun? History rarely repeats events in identical form, but it often repeats structural pressures that shape how empires expand, peak, and eventually transition. The Spanish Empire controlled vast flows of silver from the Americas, believing wealth extraction alone could sustain its dominance indefinitely. Britain built an unprecedented trade network, fueled industrial revolutions, and created a financial system that seemed too sophisticated to unravel. The Soviet Union commanded enormous territory and military capability, projecting ideological certainty while economic inefficiencies accumulated beneath the surface. Each empire looked invincible from the outside, yet internally their economic foundations were gradually shifting away from productive strength toward financial strain. Think of an empire like a living organism that thrives when it produces energy efficiently, but weakens when it survives on borrowed reserves. In early stages, growth feels organic and creative, yet in later stages, it feels increasingly dependent on leverage and financial engineering. Stage 1 begins with expansion driven by productivity, innovation, and a collective belief that opportunity is greater than risk. Stage 2 introduces financialization, where profits from capital markets begin to outweigh profits from building tangible goods and real infrastructure. Stage 3 accelerates debt accumulation, as borrowing appears rational and sustainable because asset prices continue rising. At this point, growth looks impressive, but it is increasingly supported by leverage rather than genuine increases in productive capacity. Stage 4 brings rising inequality, as financial assets inflate faster than wages, concentrating wealth and gradually eroding social cohesion. Stage 5 introduces institutional strain, where trust in political systems, media, and financial fairness begins to fracture. Stage 6 arrives through an external shock, such as war, currency instability, or a credit contraction that exposes structural weakness. Stage 7 represents reset, not always dramatic collapse, but a reordering of power and influence that permanently alters global leadership. Empires rarely fall because of a single catastrophic error, but rather because internal mathematics slowly overtakes political confidence. When interest payments grow faster than productive output, the system begins redirecting energy toward maintaining itself instead of creating new value. It resembles a corporation paying old liabilities with new credit, sustaining appearances while underlying resilience diminishes. Spain flooded Europe with silver, yet inflation quietly diluted the value of that wealth and weakened its domestic productive base. Britain financed 2 world wars through borrowing, preserving global influence temporarily while long-term debt obligations accumulated. After the wars, economic leadership gradually migrated across the Atlantic, even as Britain maintained symbolic prestige. The Soviet Union prioritized military parity, but its centrally planned economy struggled to generate innovation comparable to its rivals. When oil prices shifted and fiscal strain intensified, the structural imbalance could no longer be concealed by ideology or force. Collapse rarely announces itself dramatically because institutions often focus on protecting perception rather than correcting structural weaknesses. The most dangerous phase of decline is not panic, but denial combined with short-term stabilization measures. In that stage, policy responses treat symptoms, while the deeper arithmetic imbalance continues compounding. When an empire weakens, the consequences ripple through trade systems, currency hierarchies, and global alliances in complex and unpredictable ways. Reserve currencies gradually lose dominance, capital flows redirect toward perceived stability, and geopolitical influence becomes more fragmented. For ordinary citizens, decline feels less like catastrophe and more like persistent stagnation combined with rising living costs. Opportunities narrow subtly, social mobility slows, and generational expectations adjust downward without a clear moment of realization. The narrative of inevitability fades, replaced by uncertainty about what future prosperity might look like. Empires do not disappear solely because of external enemies, but because internal financial structures eventually outweigh productive momentum. Debt itself is not inherently destructive, yet debt that outpaces innovation gradually transforms from tool into burden. Financial sophistication can extend dominance temporarily, but it cannot indefinitely replace sustainable production and institutional trust. The 7 stages are not prophecy or destiny, but diagnostic signals visible to those willing to examine structural data calmly. History suggests that power rarely vanishes entirely, but instead migrates towards systems that restore balance between productivity and leverage. The deeper question is not whether decline is possible, but whether reform can occur before structural mathematics dictates the outcome. If empires follow structural patterns rather than random chaos, which stage do you believe the modern global order is approaching, and what evidence supports your view?